Looking for the right answer isn't the only way to get this question right. I can also carefully eliminate the other 4 and see if I land on something.
Because sometimes like figuring out why an answer choice is right is so inoptimal for your time. Hi everyone, welcome to the 7Sage LSAT podcast. My name's Henry and I'm joined with my co-host
Aastha and Henry. Now today we've got a really fun episode planned. We asked y'all.
Is it ever not a fun episode?
That's true. I feel like I start every episode with
we gotta
have
stop.
A fun episode.
No, today we've got a terrible episode for you guys.
God awful episode. That
horrible, really.
We have an episode, a neutral episode for you guys.
We've been treating you guys too well.
Where we asked the listeners to submit the best LSAT advice that you've heard. So we've got a couple of different pieces of advice that we wanted to share with you guys that came from you guys. So I'm excited to get started. A couple of them came from Reddit. Some of y'all sent some emails. So we're just kind of combining all of them to chat about, you guys have heard advice from Henry and I for months now. Maybe even, no, I was going to say a year, but it hasn't been a year. We started, in February?
It's felt like a lifetime, Aastha. Every day. Every day with you. Might as well be 10.
Besides the point, you've heard our advice for months. And so we wanted to switch it up a little bit and give y'all advice from different perspectives. So, Henry, why don't you start us off with the first piece of advice we have here?
First piece of advice that got sent in, and something, it's great. A lot of the advice that we got are things that we've talked about before.
Crazy how that works.
It's slowing down to speed up. Now, you'd think, oh, well, if I go too slow in the initial outset, I'm not going to have enough time to do the questions. This is the case of reading comprehension. It's happened to all of us before. Mm-hmm. You're reading a passage, and you're like, oh, man, I'm going too slow in the passage. So I just got to get to the questions, only for you to realize that, wait a minute, you have no idea what happened in the passage. You have no idea what's going on. And then you have to go back, and you have to read, and you have to go back again, and then read again, and then confirm. And then all of a sudden you're in disaster territory.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the rabbit and the turtle?
Yes, I have.
It's kind of like that.
Slow and steady.
Who's the rabbit and the turtle?
Race?
What is that story? No, what? Yeah, wait, stop. Wait a minute. What is that called?
Tortoise?
It's not the rabbit and the turtle.
It's the
tortoise and the hare.
Tortoise and the hare. Yes, that's what it is.
Okay.
Where the hare goes super fast and then has to take a break, but the tortoise is slow and steady, and wins the race.
In any case, the whole point is you can't go too fast. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning. And it really applies to a lot of things. I think very commonly you think of RC. And you look at that where you spend not enough time reading the passage. You don't know what's happening in the passage, so you can't answer the question. That is going to be true, though, at the more micro level, right? In LR, where you're looking at something and you think, well, if I just blitz through the stimulus, I'm going to be able to go to the answer choices. I'll go back, look at them. And that's really, I think it's a pretty bad strategy because usually it's the fast reading that gets you caught up. Mm-hmm. Right? If you read slowly and you try to consume the stimulus up front, you can usually catch those little ideas that are how they trap you on this test. I'm thinking immediately to comparative phrasing. Mm-hmm. Right? If you read it really quickly or you don't spend some time to process the information, like I say, drug X is much better at treating cancer than drug Y. You might think that drug X is even good at treating cancer at all, but it might not be.
Yeah.
Right? It could be neutral in that drug Y gives you cancer. I guess, it's true. It could do nothing. Drug Y gives you cancer. And in that case, we have a comparative. But the terminology, it sounds so much like, drug X, it has to be at least all right. It's better than drug Y. So moving slowly through a stimulus is a good way to ensure that you're not going to, one, fall into any of those traps that are very easy to fall into. I mean, even if you go slowly through a stimulus, it's still easy to fall into. I get trapped sometimes. Now, of course, I claw my way out. No, of course, I claw my way out. Right? It's like in Saw. I'm like one of those people who gets out of the Saw trap. I'll do whatever it takes.
The important thing here, and I think I hear this from a lot of students, of you want me to slow down to speed up. Well, that makes absolutely no sense because I don't even finish the section on time, right? I am going too slow. I can't get through everything. I can't get through all the material. Now, sometimes that means you are just taking way too long to read the passage, right? If you're taking 10, 12 minutes to read a passage and you're working on standard time, yeah, I'm with you, right? Maybe you need to speed up on the passage a little bit. But for the most part, that's not where a lot of the students that I speak to, that's not where they're slowing down. That's not why they're running out of time. Where they're running out of time is going to the questions and being confused, right? They're investing a lot of time in being confused and wondering and going back and forth. And I want you to ask yourself, if you feel like you're rushed for time, you don't feel like you can finish this test in time, where is your time going, right? Is your time going into really understanding the passage or setting up your game board or, noting down the conditional logic in a stimulus? Or is your time going into being confused? right? And if it's the latter, well, slowing down on the front end of it can really help you speed up through those questions and help you get through those questions a lot better. And if you find this test to be very frustrating, as most people do, and you find this test to be very confusing, and you're always down to those last two answer choices and you never know how to pick, and that's what slows you down, whatever that might be, slowing down earlier might help a lot in combating those timing issues down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And you spoke a little bit about this idea of like slow, smooth is fast. You know, when I'm doing an LSAT section or an LR section or an RC section, I'm really trying to have a very even pacing, right? Where it's like I'm moving through the stimulus at the same rate as I'm moving through the answer choices. And of course, I'll go back to it or I'll pause and I'll think. But my goal is to read at a pace at which I can comprehend it as I go. Right, instead of like reading really fast and then trying to retroactively, like understand what I just read. I want it to be like a slow enough but quick enough pace. I know it's like a weird balance that you're trying to. You don't want to be super stop and starty, where you're just reading as you go. By the time you get to the end of the stimulus, by the time you get to the end of the paragraph or the sentence, you already understand what's happening.
Yeah,
right? And that's really what you want to be going for here. You don't feel like you need to speed through. There really is enough time on this test. I feel like these sections there's actually a lot of time on a section. Do you ever get those vibes? At least for like LG, there's a lot of time on a section.
There's a lot of time if you are moving at a very consistent pace. I think that like the second you run into a question where you just stop, right? You'd spend 4 or 5 minutes just stumbling. That I think snowballs into, oh my God, I don't have enough time to finish. But if you are moving at a very consistent pace throughout the section, I do think the timing it's challenging, but I think it's fair for what they're asking you to do.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Action item is what I usually say is pretend you're reading it out loud, but in your head. Usually when we read in our head, we go a lot faster than how we would normally read, right? If I was speaking it. And so one of my go-tos is like when you're reading, try to read at a pace that you could envision yourself talking it out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you're a very fast talker, you'd slow that down even more. It's have to slow down, right? Things like that, right? It is important to slow down when you are reading an LR stimulus because you want to make sure that you do not fall into traps.
You have never spoken at that pace a day in your life.
I know, right? But that's how I go. Like that's how I read it in my head. It's kind of like how when you read like Reddit. Do you read Reddit ever? Are you on Reddit?
Sometimes, sure.
Yeah. I'm only on Reddit when, we're getting trashed. But when I read like Reddit, it's like I have like the same voice I hear. And they talk at the same pace. And that's the same my Reddit voice is the voice I'm looking at on the LSAT. Now, is that helpful? No. Is that something about me? Yes. Do with that what you will.
I do think it's helpful advice though to make sure your inner monologue isn't speeding you up, and that also right. I think if you're slowing down with how you're reading, it's a lot easier for you to stay focused on the task at hand and not be panicking about the last question, or I only have so much time left, or I'm freaking out, or this is life or death, which we'll go into in a minute here. But yeah, I totally agree with you with all those timing tips. So the next one that we have written down here is however long you think you're going to study, take that and double it.
Double it. Give it to the next guy.
Talked about this a lot on our episode, I think it was 2 episodes ago now, about whether or not you should retake and when you should study, or when you should plan to take the test as you're studying. I think that's a really helpful frame. I think a lot of people hear this like, study for 3 months and you'll be ready to go. And I think maybe for some people that works out really well, but if you're looking to really reach your potential on this test, double it. Right, and try to. Some people win the lottery. Some people win the lottery. That is fair.
Yeah, it's true. There is a winner of the lottery.
And and again, it just depends on what your goals are and what your timeline is. But if you're looking to reach your ceiling with the score that you can get and open up all the opportunities that you can with getting the highest LSAT score possible, give yourself enough time. I think we've said that 30 million times on this podcast, but it's one of the most important things that I see. Right, if you are planning on applying this cycle, right, today is September 19th that we're recording this. If you're planning on applying this cycle and you just started studying for the test and you want to take it in November, you'll get a score, but it just might not be your ceiling, right? So give yourself enough time as possible. Any other kind of quick notes on that? I know we've hashed that out a ton on this podcast.
I think it's just good advice, right? And the doubling it, don't take that literally. More is take that giving yourself the opportunity to study longer.
Yeah.
Don't set a hard cutoff for yourself.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Next one.
Get ready to study in a different way than you did for school.
This
That's a
one
pretty
was
good one.
interesting. Yeah, the way that this one was laid out was, for school, I think a lot of the studying that we do, depending on what subjects you were studying, but was focused on memorization, right? Making flashcards, making outlines, trying to memorize everything that you can. And that works really well for school. Something that we've also said a lot on this podcast is that the LSAT is not a test of memorization, it's a test of habit. When you're studying for school, that works really well, but this test is not designed to be memorizable, right? You can make flashcards for certain things. I don't say swear off of flashcards for the LSAT, but flashcards are not going to help you complete your studying, right? It's a tool that you can use. Yeah, but that can't just be it. So instead of focusing on memorizing and spending a ton of time learning all the foundational stuff, it's important, but you really have to practice, right? Practice the skills, make a strategy, make a plan, do all of those things, because and I think Chris talked about this a lot in the episode that we did with him recently, of the test has a really good way of kind of equalizing itself, where you can memorize everything from one test and then still score the same on the next test, right? The information doesn't carry question to question, it carries from concept to concept or strategy to strategy. So if you're just getting into studying and you're thinking this is going to be like the SATs or your final exam for your stats class or any other type of schooling that you've done, don't be surprised when the LSAT is different, right? It's something that's just a completely different beast than any other test that most of us have ever taken before. I personally had never experienced anything like the LSAT before in school. I know you were a philosophy major, so did you have some exposure to this stuff, or was it still different?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could have written this piece of advice because I just didn't study. And so...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I think in philosophy, it's a lot more paper writing. So it's not... You don't really experience a lot of tests. And so, it's definitely a little bit different in the sense that, I feel like I hadn't done a multiple choice test in, I don't know, 3 years.
Yeah.
It'd been a long time since I had taken it, and I didn't really know what to do to study for it, besides just, subscribe to 7Sage, and then everything got very clear, and it was a straight and easy path.
Of course, of course.
I do agree that it's a lot less raw memorization and a lot more retooling your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ideally, right? In theory, it's you could stick an alien in front of the test, knowing nothing, right? And if they just knew English, they would pretend it's a perfectly rational alien, right? Let's say they don't know much about the world. They could get a perfect score on this test. They could get a perfect score on this test because it's not a memorization thing, right? It's a matter of reasoning.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you are taking this, what you're looking to do is to build a better reasoning foundation rather than remember any one thing.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to add to it, there is an element of memorization. Now, you do have to memorize things like only if, indicators to understand conditional relationships and understand, what a sufficient condition is, what a necessary condition is. That is maybe 5% of your studying.
Yeah.
Right. Most of it is just in the application. And I think that also goes to a good point, too, where if you're doing the core curriculum of any sort of a book or any sort. I don't want to speak for all the books, but I'm guessing this is going to be true for a lot of different study materials. Don't feel like you need to be an expert after you're finished with a chapter or you're finished with the lesson or you're finished with the module. Right? Becoming an expert comes from practice. And so as long as you have a couple ideas about the concepts, the rest of it gets ironed out just through repetition and practicing. Definitely review a chapter, right? Definitely review the lesson. But if at the end of the lesson you're like, oh my God, there's 100 things, I need to remember all of them. No, you don't need to remember them. You just need to start doing. You need to be aware of them.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point because I get a lot of questions of, oh, I finished the core curriculum.
It is a great point, isn't it?
I finished the core curriculum.
I can't help myself. I can't help myself.
What was I saying? Oh, I get a lot of questions of, oh, I finished the core curriculum, and my score didn't go up drastically. What did I do wrong? What happened? It's okay, well, doing the core curriculum or learning the foundations of this test is necessary to get a good score. It's not sufficient though, right? You've learned all the things. I think once upon a time I talked about a swimming metaphor of you can read about swimming and watch people swim and do all that stuff, but you're not actually going to be a swimmer or be any good at swimming until you actually get in the water, right? So I think that still really applies. So you can learn all the things, learn the foundations. They're very, very important, but your improvement most likely is going to come from practice, right? Practicing these skills over and over again. All right, let's move on to the next piece of advice then. The way that I have it written in my notes is relax. No biggie. And the point of that, the idea is, I think that the importance of the LSAT is emphasized a lot, and for good reason, right? The LSAT is important. It really strengthens your application, yada, yada, yada.
Yes.
But I think that a lot of people take that and go into this like doom mentality of it's do or die. And, you know, it's not do or die. You know, it's important. But I don't think you do yourself any favors by overemphasizing the significance of this test as you're doing a practice test or as you're working on a problem, right? If you're trying to map out a logic game, a helpful thought is not, if I don't map out this logic game, my life is over. A helpful thought is not, if I don't finish this in the next 5 seconds, everything I know is going to crumble, right? And I know that sounds dramatic, but I'm sure a lot of people listening who have been at this for a little bit, especially if you've been studying for a while, have felt that way a lot. And I don't have any, you know, one size fits all how to stop stressing about the LSAT, right? I personally, I think I've talked about how like my hair started falling out after I studied for the LSAT because I was still am a highly anxious person.
Yes.
But whatever tools that you use in your real life to help mitigate your stress and mitigate your anxiety, I would highly recommend using that when you're studying for the LSAT. So whether that's exercising or making plans with people you love or, you know, keeping up with your hobbies, keeping up with other things, whatever you can do to make the LSAT not a miserable, stressful experience, the better, right? Because you will perform better if you're not worrying about the future of your career in the middle of an RC passage, right? And I know how dramatic that sounds, but I don't think it's a feeling that is isolated to just a couple people.
Yeah, I think too, like, one way you can look at this too is that, like, you should expect to get some problems wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Part of the path of being right and getting the score you want involves you getting problems wrong. Right? So if you mess up a logic game, that's okay. Right? You have to mess up a certain amount of logic games to get them right. Yeah. It's just true. You basically do. You have to mess up a couple problems to get them right down the line. So you can just look at it as you're on your path. Individual problems are not a big deal. You're supposed to miss problems. Right, it's how it is supposed to go. So I think relaxing. It is no biggie. I mean, it is a big deal though. Too.
It is.
Let's not get a little too crazy here.
It's not helpful to remind yourself.
Don't be panicking. Be preparing.
Put that on a t-shirt. Not bad.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like there's nothing you can do. Yes, it's coming for you. The LSAT is coming for you. The only thing you can do is prepare. Yeah. So just keep preparing, and you don't have to view it as some sort of stressful, negative, terrible thing that's coming, but channel that into preparation. Yeah. Right. Like, okay, I'm gonna, if I feel bad about this or I'm worried about this, let me do 5 minutes of studying right now. Or it's like, hey, this isn't working out for me. That's fine. This is not my day today, right? More studying right through this is not going to make me better off. Right? And so all of that is preparation. Yeah. And so, look at it as in terms of preparation. That's literally the only avenue that you have. And I think it's not the end of the world too. Yeah. And I think that's a great segue to the next point that we have here is make a list of what to do when you don't know what to do. But I think this is really helpful. This is something that one of our listeners put in of, oh, I have a list of if I panic during a logic game, what am I going to do? If I read an RC passage and I don't understand what's going on, I know what to do. If I am going through LR and I realize I only have a couple minutes left for the last 5 questions, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And I think preparing for those worst case scenarios and actually making a physical list, right? Something that you read over before you take the test can do wonders for mitigating some of that anxiety that you might have about the things that could potentially go wrong. Because like Henry said, right, there's no point in being really stressed about it or panicking about it. You can prepare for it, right? And every time you find yourself in that panic of, oh, I just got this question wrong, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm running out of time here, I don't know what to do. Okay, let's make a list, right? Let's make a list of things that we're going to do if and when any of those things happen. How long that list is or how comprehensive that list is up to you. But I do think that almost every student could benefit from having some sort of a game plan, right? A backup plan. What would be on your list?
A couple of things that were on my list were like something for me that really helped was looking away from the screen for like 5-ish seconds. And I would remind myself anytime I'm starting to panic or I don't understand something or my eyes are just like glazing over the words, I would close my eyes, I would turn my head like just away from the screen and I would count to 5. And that for me worked really well just to regroup myself so I could get through the questions a lot more efficiently. The other one was skipping. I just kind of wrote that down for myself. Like, if I don't know what's going on, I'm going to skip it. That's fine. I'll come back to it later. I'll worry about it later.
Yeah.
Other one I would remind myself about a lot, and this worked for me. This isn't like universal advice, but only flagging 5 questions in a section, just because I didn't want to sit there and flag a bajillion questions, and then when I have 3 minutes left at the end of the section, I don't know where I should actually be dedicating my time. So those were a couple of things just off the top of my head that I remember I made a list for myself for and just reminded myself of before test day. What about you?
I actually thought you were going from like if you don't know what to study or you don't know what to do. Like, that's what I thought this piece of advice was.
Oh, no, I meant like when you get to test
if you don't know what
day.
to do, like what's the thing you could do? Oh, like do 2 logic games, like foolproof.
I mean, I guess that is
but on
one
test
way to
day,
use
right? You
it,
don't know
but
what to
yeah,
do.
that's how I perceived it at least.
Yeah, mine was just if I didn't know, I would just start with the conclusion. And then if I did know, I would also start with the conclusion. Work my way backwards. It's the classic advice, right? The conclusion sets everything up.
Yeah.
Right, but if you don't have a handle on it, you're like, all right, what am I trying to prove here? All right, what are the pieces of evidences that try to support that idea? Are there any not code words? What's the words that oh my God.
Categories?
This is how you know my brain has been rotting.
Oh.
The category words. The code words. They're the code words. It's crazy. Whatever. Yeah, the category words. Like, are they talking about iced coffee in the stimulus, and they're talking about cold coffee in the premises? And those 2 things aren't the same. Things like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, having that list I think can be helpful if you're someone who often finds that they get stuck. It is going to be useful.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, let's move on to the last piece of advice we'll talk about today, which we got from Reddit. Actually, we made a Reddit post for this episode, and the piece of advice is you get 2 chances to answer every question, picking 1 correct answer and eliminating 4 incorrect answers. And the way that I've heard this piece of advice phrased in other ways is you have to make 2 mistakes to get a question wrong, right? You have to both incorrectly identify that the right answer is right, and you also have to incorrectly identify that a wrong answer is right. There are 2 opportunities for you to get through these questions, and I think if you're struggling with finding the right answer, it can be really helpful to just flip it and be like, okay, looking for the right answer isn't the only way to get this question right. I can also sit here and really carefully eliminate the other 4 and see if I land on something. And I think that would be a great thing to add on, a list of what to do when you don't know what to do. Start eliminating, right? Start there. Try to knock out at least a couple of the answer choices before you start panicking or skip the question or move on or whatever. So yeah, I think that piece of advice is really, really helpful. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Not only is it sometimes another way, sometimes it's the optimal way. In LG, very frequently, you're ruling out 4 answer choices and you're picking 1 without even really realizing like why the right answer choice works. But you just know that 4 are wrong, so you're just gonna pick it and you're gonna move. So like in LG, that's often the case. Is you're rolling 4 things out, and it's an optimal strategy. It's not even like a worse strategy. In LR too, if you're really stuck, you can rule 4 things out quite easily. Not quite easily, but there are a lot of questions that I think are really hard, where the wrong answer choices have like some pretty flagrant issues, and the right answer choice is hard to see, but there's nothing obviously wrong about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to this one sufficient assumption problem about like money not existing, where the right answer choice, I guarantee anyone who got that right, ruled out 4, picked it, and then they came back to it maybe after the fact to prove to themselves why the right answer choice is right. It's an embedded conditional, and you have to take the contrapositive. It's very complicated.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, but it's a very good strategy, because sometimes like figuring out why an answer choice is right is so inoptimal for your time.
Yeah.
Right? It just eats up way too much time. Like if you have a pretty good guess, a pretty good reason why 4 of them are wrong, you don't have to know why the other answer choice is right. So I do like that piece of advice there.
Okay, awesome. That brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you guys learned a little something from both us and from your fellow listeners. So thank you to everyone who submitted the advice that they wanted to share, and I'm glad we were able to talk about it. So until next time, bye y'all.
Thank you guys.